Hello everyone, Alasdair Gold here. I think we're at that scenario now where I know sometimes people look at the way I start these videos and it kind of sums up my mood. I think I'm going to have to go the way of Antonio Conte and just you can only laugh about it because it's so ridiculous now, what's happening with Tottenham Hotspur. I'm just going to read this out. This is going to be a weird way to start a video and it's going to sound like I've got stuck on like a record that's got stuck. But if you want to have anything that proves the inconsistency of Tottenham Hotspur in the year 2022, listen to this. This is Tottenham's results, either win, loss, draw, whatever, right? Win, loss, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss, loss, win, lost, win, lost. It sounds like I'm kind of doing some like Wizard of Oz marching. That is Tottenham's results. Other than that kind of little double defeat in the middle with Southampton and Wolves, it's just like, what are they doing? They're actually becoming predictably unpredictable in a weird way. It's just, oh my goodness. And I mean, it's been such a kind of a weird time with all the northern trips as well in a row. And actually, a little shout out to Jonathan Veal from the Press Association who gave me a couple of lifts from my travel lodge up in Middlesbrough to and from the game on Tuesday night. The reason I'm shouting him out is because he almost lost his car. In terms of, we parked up at the Riverside, got out the car and noticed the car was rolling backwards. Mr. Veal had forgotten to put his handbrake on, and it looked like it could become Riverside, could become River Inn, because that car was starting to roll. Thankfully, he dived in. He's a lithe fellow, and he jumped in there and grabbed his handbrake and put it up. But yeah, I don't normally give shout-outs to lifts, but that was potentially a disastrous one as well. But yeah, back to talking of disaster, back to Tottenham. It is just, Middlesbrough fully deserved it. Let's get out of the way first. Whatever rant is about to come about Tottenham, individuals, whatever, Middlesbrough fully deserved it. They were the better team on the night. They had more possession. They had more shots on goal. The crowd was superb. The Riverside was absolutely rocking. It really was. It was, if you're looking at it as a neutral or a Middlesbrough fan, it was a proper FA Cup game. 8th in the Championship side. Took on 7th in the Premier League. And absolutely showed them up. They did. Tottenham didn't deserve to come away with anything from the game. They were lucky almost it went to extra time. And we weren't, but, they were lucky they prolonged the agony that long. But having said all of that, it is another embarrassing defeat for Tottenham. I'd say since 2019, I'd say. There's just been too many of them. I've got a little list of some of them here. Colchester, 0-0 away, lost 4-3 on penalties in the Carabao Cup. Royal Antwerp 1, Tottenham 0. Dinamo Zagreb 3, Tottenham 0. Paços de Ferreira 1, Tottenham 0. Vitesse Arnhem 1, Tottenham 0. NS Mura 2, Tottenham 1. And now Middlesbrough 1, Tottenham 0. And what's the one thing in all of that? Tottenham scored one goal in all of those matches against, on paper, much weaker teams. One goal. I don't know whether that says to a really poor mentality within this squad, that they just believe they're going to win these matches and don't need to fight and scrap as much as the other team. But, when it's a long sequence of matches like that, there's something kind of rotten there, isn't there? You can get away with one or two, you can get away with the old cup shock. But when it's that many in the last 2.5, 3 years, it's something really wrong there. And, we're going to talk about that, obviously, because it's different managers, but a lot of the same players. And I'm including the big players, the important players in that as well, because they've been involved in a fair few of those defeats as well. So they're not getting away from the finger of blame. Conte, though. Conte was surprising after the game. I've been there and I've been there for a few. I'm trying to think, is there any of those matches I've missed? I think the Vitesse away. I think that was probably the only one. Oh, and Antwerp, I think, was behind closed doors, wasn't it, at that point? I think that's the only one of those matches I wasn't at. But every one of those games pretty much had a kind of a very upset manager. And obviously we've seen a very upset Antonio Conte. That was not the case on Tuesday night. He came out. We're back to in-person press conferences now, before and after games, which is, I think it's better for you guys as well. It's better for us because we can actually engage with the manager, and I think they feel like they have to give you more. And I think that is a knock-on effect that's going to be better for you guys and girls, because you're going to get more. You're going to hear more from the managers. They don't have to just give a little bit and then you get muted on Zoom. They can properly explain things, and we can do proper follow-up questions as well. So, yeah, that should benefit you. But Conte, he was smiling and laughing. And this isn't to say he was happy with defeat or anything like that. We know what Conte's like. He absolutely hates them, losing anything. But I don't know, it was almost like, I don't know whether he was just at that point where you've tried everything with this team, and they're still doing daft stuff like that. You're trying to get some consistency out of them. You're screaming to them like, just win 2 in a row, just do it, and they just refuse to do it. It's not even draws. They're, like I say, I've read out that list to you. They're winning, losing, winning, losing. It's there's no in between. They either seem to be decent or dreadful. And he did. He just kind of. I think this is. I think that is probably what it is. I think he has tried everything possible to try and get this lot into some kind of rhythm. I mean, from what I understand that after the Burnley defeat, when he was properly Incredible Hulk mode, he threatened the players that if they didn't beat Leeds, they'd be staying in the lodge at Hotspur Way for the 3 nights between the Leeds and Middlesbrough games. I understand that that's a very nice hotel and all that sort of stuff, but it's not really about that. It's about the fact that they'd be away from their families, their loved ones, their children, partners, whatever. It'd be like you or I having to stay the night at work for 3 nights. However much we enjoy our work, probably don't want to be kipping over and then the next morning going back to work, kipping over, back to work kind of thing, and having no away time. And that did the trick, it would seem. Spurs went to Leeds, albeit a dreadful Leeds team, and they won 4-0. So then you'd think, okay, all right, you're in the swing of it. Go to a championship team. You've got a job to do. It's not going to be easy. You saw that they beat Man U. Oh, no, you're just going to turn up and kind of quite passively at times let them just run by you. Fantastic. It's... He kind of spoke afterwards. I'm going to give you the quote in a minute about the carrot and the stick, which obviously, if anyone's not aware of it, it's the kind of famous old, essentially a donkey expression, I think it is, isn't it? Is it a donkey or horse? I think it would be a donkey, more likely. It's not a pleasant expression when you really kind of boil it down. But essentially, it's, do you treat the players in a nice way to make them feel loved, or do you punish them, criticise them, and tell them that they're rubbish, they need to improve? And Conte's kind of saying, you're trying to do bits of both. And there's someone in the club that feel like, because it's a younger group, that, maybe these players just need that arm around their shoulder, like Poch used to do. That was very much his style of management. And obviously, he was probably the last one to get a decent bit of consistency out of Tottenham. Mainly the season probably finished second to, yes, Antonio Conte's Chelsea was probably the most consistent they've been, although I'd suggest that loving arm around the shoulder, that was as far as they could get, because maybe they didn't then have that mental kind of steel, I suppose, to go to the next level. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'm one that thinks you should pander to players all the time. I think otherwise you create different kinds of problems within the camp, and almost, I don't want to say spoilt because it sounds like they're children, but a feeling that everything isn't their fault and it's everyone else's fault. That kind of, and that's, I suppose that is what spoiled kids do act like. But Conte's tried them both. He has. I want to get a quote because here we are. Yes, sometimes you have to be strong, sometimes light. My coaches in Italy, especially Carletto Mazzoni, taught me that the coach sometimes has to use the carrot, sometimes the stick. I have to try the right way at the individual moment. After Burnley, I used the stick and we won. After Leeds, the carrot, and we lost. And this is where you had a big laugh at that as well, we did. I repeat, the coach has to try to find always the best solution, not because you're upset, frustrated and disappointed, At every moment, the situation has to be very clear. I know there's a lot of space for improvement for this team, and we have to try to be more stable. Tonight we showed that we have a lot of space for improvement in this aspect. I mean, the other reason he might have been quite light in his mood and not as this is the end of the world was it could have been very much a thing of showing, I better not be a raging kind of bull in a china shop again after a defeat. Otherwise, that will play into this narrative that I'm an emotional kind of roller coaster of a manager. The other potential thing could be that maybe, and this is just a guess, maybe Conte feels that it was a competition that they probably weren't going to win. He kind of hinted at that the day before in the press conference, said it would be very difficult for them to win it. And maybe he's thinking in his head, look, for the sake of maybe another 1 or 2 games where we potentially get knocked out by, I don't know, a Man City or Chelsea or whatever, then instead I have 3 weeks more 3 weeks to prepare the team, and actually we just go at this Premier League for the last few months and actually find some consistency. Because I think I said this in the last video, you look at the stats under Conte at Tottenham, every time they've had 6 or more days to prepare for a match, they've won it. Barring one, which I think was a draw. Everything else has been a win. On the flip side, when he's had 3 or 4 days between games, the results have been much more mixed. And maybe he knows that. Maybe he knows he's a manager that needs more time. Certainly some of his critics suggest that, his lack of European success. I think the Europa League final a couple of years back was the first time he's reached European football as a manager. Maybe that's part of it, that he does need that little bit more time to drill them on a training ground for each game, and he loses that. Although he could quite rightly point to the fact, well, I won the league. I was winning league matches 3 or 4 days after those European games, so it doesn't quite stick, I guess. But yeah, he's definitely is a manager who's a league winner. You can see that. Was it 5 or 6 titles? Whereas he actually does. Yeah, I think he's had domestic cups as well. He certainly won the FA Cup, hasn't he, with Chelsea in the second season? And I think he's won a couple of Italian cups as well, maybe one. So it's not entirely the case, but on the whole, that's his MO. It's winning league titles. It was quite interesting, Conte, actually. The day before the game at Middlesbrough, he was very, very wanted to paint this picture that when you see him get as angry as he was and as emotional as he was after the Burnley game, that's strategy. You might remember that I said to you that I'd been told by those around him that it was a ploy to try and get the players fired up, and it obviously did its part against Leeds. Whether it was that or the threat of the Lodge, I don't know, but I don't entirely buy it. I don't. I like Conte and I like the way he does stuff. But I don't think that was all strategy. Maybe 5-10% strategy. The rest is emotion. No, I think I get the impression that after matches he is an absolute fireball of kind of angry energy when they lose, and when they win he's very much the opposite, and he's bouncing off the walls kind of thing with happiness. So yeah, I don't think, as much as he'd like to portray it, and the problem is, the other flip side of this, now he's told everyone it's strategy, it kind of loses its impact, I guess, because people just go, oh, he's just doing that because it's his strategy. Oh, it's just his planned thing. And it's a bit like, in being so desperate to show it wasn't emotion, you might have ended up kind of ruining the impact of it. But then, like I say, I guess if he's emotional up and down every other match, then that's going to lose its impact as well. But yeah, it was poor. It was just so poor. It was so poor. This is the thing. Even the match itself, it was such a kind of almost like a non-event for Spurs. They did so little in it. This was a team that they should have been going to, and just, they should have really been sewn up the match. It should have been a game where, you're looking at the kind of thing where, we can bring on a few players towards the end, give them some minutes or whatever. I'm starting to wonder now, every time recently that Conte's stuck with the winning team, they've lost. I think he's going to have to start thinking, maybe I just do need to keep freshening up a couple of legs. And I do think tiredness with a couple of players played its part. It wasn't the only reason that they were awful, but there definitely would have been some tiredness in there. I definitely think in the kind of the centre of the pitch, they looked really fatigued. We're going to come to that in a minute, but ultimately though, tidiness can only really be explained for a certain amount of it. I think at the end of the day, I think Conte perhaps wasn't as angry because it's kind of playing out like he said. He's made it very clear to those behind the scenes that this squad is not good enough for what they want him to do with Tottenham. If they want him to challenge for a league title, this set of players is not good enough. If anyone has read my stuff and watched my things before, they know I'm very much of the thought of you can't always blame the manager. Definitely there can be tactical little things and bits and pieces that managers do wrongly, and there can be things behind the scenes where they don't deal with things particularly well. But on the whole, I think when it comes down to Tottenham, I think you have to look at the very clear fact that, Daniel Levy in 21 years has had 12 full-time managers working underneath him, taking charge of the team. And that's not even to include the many, many caretaker managers that have been there, the Ryan Masons, the David Pleats, the Clive Allens. There's been a fair few of them kind of thing over the years. And, if you actually look at that, so 12 full-time managers in 21 years, that would be it would be less than, it would be more than actually a manager every other year. But then to make that worse, Poch was there for 5.5 years. So, it's not even that. You look at the turnover of managers and it's incredible. It's, the Poch 5.5 years now not only feels like must have been a lifetime then, but it also feels like it was a lifetime ago. 12 managers in 21 years. That is it is incredible. And they're just the fall guys every time. Whether that's for mistakes made by Daniel Levy, those at the top, the board, the recruitment process, or the players. It's so... I think I said this before. I used this word before. It's boring. It's so boring that the manager becomes the fall guy. It's like, shove him out the front. Yeah, he can take all the rubbish that comes, and then we can bin him when it's all done and just kind of hide behind them. I don't like that at all. I don't. I mean, Nuno lasted 4 months. There were certainly other things going on with Nuno where we can question whether he should have been appointed in the first place. But if you're a club that is just ditching managers after 4 months, and it's a bit like, it puts Tottenham into the kind of likes of like the Watfords, who, yes, I get it, they have their very certain way of working, their model, but they turn over managers like anything. And then I suppose the flip side is you have like a Chelsea, but they turn over their managers so much because they demand a certain level of success and they have the money to kind of back it up. But for Tottenham to do that, how anyone can wonder how it's such an unstable team with a lack of consistency. It's because there's no stability and consistency at the club. It's incredible when you think about it. And I mean, I've said this as well, but you've now appointed Conte, a very certain kind of manager in Liam Neeson style, has a particular set of skills, and those particular set of skills are lent to not fighting to get into the top four. They are meant to be fighting above the top four, to be a challenger, to be someone competing. And Tottenham's transfer profile, signing young players, developing them, keep retaining their value. Yes, it's kept them financially stable over the years. Of course it does. But it's not the Antonio Conte style of managing and football. I was trying to think of the closest alternative, comparison to Tottenham is maybe someone like Borussia Dortmund. Dortmund have had more recent success. You could maybe argue it's slightly easier to do that in Germany because obviously there's the big boy of Bayern Munich. But on the whole, if you can put something together and Bayern Munich can't find that same consistency, you've got a better chance of challenging than you have in the Premier League where there's 4 or 5 teams all kind of going for it each year. But even Borussia Dortmund, I was trying to look at, even their biggest transfer fees aren't actually that much. They're just kind of a breeding ground. The way they develop players is superb as well. But you look at Tottenham and it's tough to even compare them to Dortmund because Spurs just lurch from one manager to the next. With Dortmund, maybe their managers get taken on sometimes, as in they get taken to other clubs. Of course, at times they have sacked managers, but With Spurs, it's just they lurch from one kind of manager to the next. There's no stability, and they've gone with up and coming coaches, likes of Pochettino when he was at Southampton. But Daniel Levy actually wanted Louis van Gaal, an established manager. They've gone from older managers to the Harry Redknapps of this world, Jacques Santini, who was kind of in the middle, and Martin Jol was a progressive kind of younger manager at that point. And then they've had the superstar managers like the Jose Mourinhos and the Contes, and you just kind of look at it and you think, what do you want to be? What do you want to be as a football club? Are you accepting that you're a middle kind of table club with wonderful facilities and stadium and all of that wants to eventually grow, the Pochettino style of eventually doing something? But the point of that is, if you then are going to get rid of Pochettino and bring in a superstar manager like a Mourinho, you then have to bring up everything else to meet that. You can't still act like the club around a progressive young coach, then with a manager who needs far more in their environment and backing than that. It's like the instability has been created by the club. It's been created by those at the top of the club. It's been created by Daniel Levy because of having no stable path to follow. It kind of feels like off the pitch, with the stadium, with the training facilities, with all their other stuff they're doing, a lot of good stuff with the women's team now have got their own kind of base within a Hotspur Way. When we go to the press conferences, we can see all the stuff being built for academy and the women. And also, I think when Spurs get that lease of the long-term lease of that golf club, I've forgotten the name completely. They're not using it as a golf club, despite what some people have said. But it is going to have a big women's kind of, I think, academy area there as well. And I think there's so much stability of what they're doing off the pitch. But on the pitch, it's almost like they tear up that script and they just kind of do something for a couple of years and go, nah, that hasn't worked, next. And they just move on to something else completely. And for me, that's the crux of it. How can you have stability when there's so much instability? It doesn't exist. It's a paradox. It doesn't exist together. And all the managers are coming in and just finding that. They're just, it's just, maybe Conte, maybe he was suckered in by the fact that, you look at the Tottenham team from the outside and maybe he thought, it's got Harry Kane, Son Heung-min, it's got a World Cup winning captain, it's got Serie A's best defender in its back line. There's a spine of a really good team there. Surely it just needs a little kind of finishing touches. And I think that's kind of what he's admitted to. And then he came into the club, walked through the doors and was like, whoa, this is not what I expected. And it's, and I mean, it's, you look at even recent signings and, I'm going to drag Fabio Paratici into it as well. And you look at the recent signings, albeit I know were made for a different manager. But even, you just look at them, and Romero aside, it's very difficult to kind of understand the logic, or at least the processes of identifying them. I mean, we've had Brian Hill has already been farmed out to Valencia, where they absolutely adore him. If you haven't seen the footage, last night they got through to Copa del Rey. I think they beat Athletic Bilbao. He was out on the balcony of the Mestalla and looking out over there's thousands of fans down there, and they were chanting, "Stay, Brian, stay." So he's only played about 5 games for them. Yet Tottenham, have signed this player. He's admitted this week, yes, he found the physical side of the Premier League hard, which is, of course, an indictment of the Tottenham recruitment process. And then they've chucked him out where he looks like he's going to become a star again. So there's 2 sides to that. Did you recruit properly? Did you do the processes in the right way to identify whether he was able to play in the Premier League? And the flip side is, if you still believe that is the case, then you don't send him away. You work on him. You help. I think he said something like he put on a couple of kilograms. He has been building up muscle. And you just let him adapt. Whereas instead, they've let him go back to Spain, where yes, he'll get lots of minutes. But then if he does come back to Tottenham in the summer, it's just almost like bang, straight into the kind of a surprise of the physical nature of the Premier League again. It's not joined up. I'm very aware I'm doing that thing again, which ends up getting me the scream meme that people do. You look at Galini. Galini signed as the heir to Hugo Lloris. Unfortunately, he's been anything but. We haven't really seen anything to suggest he is going to be. And I wonder whether Spurs will even, sign him permanently. I can't see almost a reason to now. I think what we're looking at was something like, was it about 13, 14 million? I can't remember how much the fee is to make him permanent. But if you're Tottenham and you've got Lloris now, for another, couple of years, do you put that money elsewhere? And, and maybe just bring in another experienced head, like an older keeper as a second choice or something. I don't know if it's worth it. And, and I think Nuno and Paratici were pretty certain that he was going to take on Lloris's mantle. And it just doesn't look that way at all. I'm sure he's very good in the dressing room and all that sort of stuff. But ultimately, you sign a goalkeeper to be a goalkeeper, not a cheerleader. And then there's Emerson Royale. Oh, Emerson. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt because he's 23 and he's in a foreign league and he's got to adapt. And I do totally understand that. But it came off the bench at the Riverside and just looks lost in this kind of football. I think that's the difference. We talk about Brian Hill, and I felt like when he came on for Spurs, you could see that he could adapt. I felt he showed glimpses of what he could do. Whereas Emerson comes on, and it's very difficult to see how he works in this Conte system. I think I could just about understand if you're saying he was signed for Nuno, which he was, as a more defensive fullback. But even his defending at times is so haphazard. I mean, you've probably seen the photo on social media of the goal, the Josh Coburn goal, which was a lovely finish. It's for teenagers scoring an FA Cup against a Premier League side. It's fairy tale stuff. It's brilliant for him. It really is. But how that goal happened was just absurd. If you've seen the photo, you'll have seen that you've got 5 Spurs players clustered in a little group as if they're having some kind of some parents chat outside the school gates after they've just dropped the kids off, and they're all standing there, and then you've got Emerson, who's almost about 6 foot behind them on the other side of the box, playing Coburn on completely, and it's just so ill-disciplined from all of them. And you look at that and you think Conte, with his demands of the defence and what love of clean sheets as an Italian coach, he's not telling them to do that. That's just really, really poor play. Really, really poor. And then Emerson tries to make up for it, slides across. He's nowhere near because it was a terrific finish. But I just feel with him, it's like, he's certainly a man who likes to break down stereotypes, is Emerson. Because I think the stereotype we all have of a Brazilian footballer is that, there's lots of flair, skill, attacking intent. Technique is top notch. Emerson breaks down that stereotype. He really does, because there's no attacking flair. As I've said before, best case scenario when he goes forward is that Spurs win a corner because one of his crosses cannons off someone and goes off. It's so. I hate to be too harsh on players that aren't. What's he been 6-7 months in the Premier League? And as I say, he is still young and he can improve, but I think my worry is a lot of the things that are going wrong for him at the moment are basic things, basic defending that knowing where to stand and not being 6 foot behind your colleagues. That was like Sunday League kind of defending. And just every time you attempted to go forward, it was just a waste of a ball. And you actually see at times, I don't know if I'm being too harsh again or maybe I'm just seeing things, but I felt that players sometimes aren't passing them the ball because they don't feel like it's going to come back to a Spurs shirt. I could be being horrendously over the top there. And I'm sorry if I am, but I just noticed it just a couple of occasions where passes weren't played out to him. And again, I hope he can improve. I do, because it's just, it just feels to me like another player that maybe isn't suited to what's required at Tottenham and has been signed. And again, like I say, this then isn't a thing of the previous regime. This is also Paratici making these decisions as well. Although I would say, I think the 2 new signings, as in the 2 January signings, are Rodrigo Bentancur and Dejan Kulusevski, both look Premier League ready. I just wonder the way that Conte's been talking about them, whether he had a little bit more of a hand in it. He's been making it very clear how ready they are for the Premier League. And you see it. Bentancur, obviously, we haven't seen the last couple of games because of that ankle injury. But he's looked comfortable in the Premier League. And Kulusevski, I'd actually say he was one of the players that I'd think I wouldn't dig out too much from Tuesday night's game, because I felt he battled away. I thought physically he does look up for the Premier League or the English game. And I think if you look at most of the decent chances Spurs created, that came from Kulusevski. He did some good work, did good crosses, finding people to ball. He had a couple of shots himself that maybe, especially one that kind of rattled past the post, that he could have done better with. He looked tired. He did. I think I think all the Spurs players at the moment, because the squad is so thin, are probably being slightly overplayed. I'm going to come to 3 more of those who I think that applies to. But yeah, I do feel that those two, they look okay. I mean, if I'm thinking about players that come away with any credit from Tuesday night's match, Hugo Lloris. I think Hugo Lloris, after a couple of, iffy moments that he'd had, I felt like he was pretty consistent Tuesday. He made a really good low save from Isaiah. I've forgotten his surname. Made a really good low save anyway in the box. And then he did another one from Tavernier that had a volley at the back post. He suddenly flung his leg out and saved that. I think he did fine. I don't think he could do much about it. Coburn's shot was just a rocket. There's not too much you can do from that kind of distance. So Lloris, I'd say. I don't think Eric Dyer was particularly bad. Although obviously, where he was for the goal, that's up for debate as well. Likewise, Ben Davies, I don't think was too bad. I think he probably is one who would be allowed to be out on that left-hand side during the goals kind of thing. And I think both Dyer and Davies tried to contribute attacking-wise. I can't really put Romero in it this time because I felt he had a few iffy moments. He got caught out of position, and there was a few occasions where he just slightly made the wrong decision. But as I said, that will happen with him because of his front foot aggressive game. You're going to get that from time to time. I think that's about it. And maybe Kulusevski almost creeps in there, but not quite. Probably, into a category of, he did really well, but I felt he showed a little bit more than others. Sonny. I wanted to talk about Sonny. I mean, no, actually, start with Kane, because I think Kane first. Kane was inconsistent again, and he's been inconsistent the last couple of weeks. Against Man City and Leeds, absolutely unplayable, honestly, showing how he's one of the world's best. Against Burnley and Middlesbrough, very quiet, looked frustrated, looked like a guy who's just like, I'm still playing with this lot. I'm sure he's not thinking that. I hope he's not thinking that. But it's kind of, that's the appearance that you get. And I felt he was pretty poor at the Riverside. He didn't take... It's one of those games where he didn't take it by the scruff of the neck. He did at Elland Road, very much so. But at the Riverside, no, he just looked a bit like an ordinary player. We had one of those bizarre free kick moments where we all know the Harry Kane free kick is probably not going to do much, and just to make matters worse, he slipped over as he was about to take it, much to all the jeers of the Riverside. Actually, Eric Dyer took a much better free kick, I think, from further out that tested the keeper. Joe Lumley in goal, not the actress Joanna Lumley, just in case you were wondering. But yeah, Kane was poor again. Maybe being overplayed right now because there is no other striker. Against Middlesbrough in the FA Cup, there should be another striker coming into that role and getting their chance. But, Dane Scarlett's only 17. It's not really the time for that yet. Sonny. I'm one of Sonny's biggest fans. I am. I feel that he comes up in big moments and saves Spurs when they need him. And he is one of my favourite players at Tottenham. Possibly my favourite. He's such a lovely guy as well. However, putting all of that to one side, he was dreadful on Tuesday night. Honestly, maybe one of the worst performances I've seen him put in. He definitely could be tired. He's been overplayed. I asked Conte a few weeks back when Romero and Son both came back for their injuries. I was like, are you going to have to manage them quite carefully? And he was like, oh yes, obviously... they need to play in certain games, but I'm going to manage them carefully because, Romero's been out for 3.5 months or so, or 3 months. Sonny's been out for about a month and a half. And what's happened? I think they've started every match. I think they've pretty much played 90 minutes almost in every match. So I totally understand that Sonny could have been shattered, but he just had one of those days where nothing worked for him. He wasn't controlling the ball well. His decision making was poor. He had that one big chance where he headed it at the back post. He just headed it really softly down at the keeper. It was weird because he kind of played. He was a bit within himself against Leeds for periods, and there was those kind of weak shots he did after some good runs. But then he scored a lovely goal at the end, and you kind of felt he was going to take that into this, but he didn't. He didn't. He was just really looked lacking in confidence. Other players were getting frustrated with him as well, which I've never seen. I have seen. No, we had it with Lloris and Son before, didn't we? In the Mourinho season, I remember it was on All or Nothing on the Amazon documentary as well. But players were getting frustrated. There was one moment when Højbjerg played him a pass in the middle, which it wasn't the greatest ball. It was kind of to his feet, and he had a man behind him. But as an attacking player of that quality, that should be an outlet, I think. You know, the likes of Kane and Son should be able to accept the ball at their feet in those scenarios and use it. And actually, Kulusevski, I've been finding, is pretty good at that. He's quite good at shielding the ball, turning and using it. But Sonny lost the ball, and it resulted in a bit of attack for Middlesbrough. I don't think it led to anything, but it did. It got them on the front foot and they attacked. And Son kind of started to come over and have a bit of a go at Højbjerg. And Eric Dyer just rushed out of the box and had a massive shouting kind of go at Son and was pointing as if to say, get up there. Like, how are you trying to say that was all his fault? You know, it's his shared responsibility or whatever. He was so angry with Sonny. Sonny was just like, look, utterly shocked. He just kind of properly went off looking quite sad. And then later on, even Kane, you know, his biggest collaborator, he had a go at him as well, because there was one moment where Sonny was coming down the left and he had 2 or 3 options in field. And for some reason, I think he just drove forward and ended up kind of losing the ball. And Kane had a bit of a shout at him, as if to say, you know, you're better than that. And it was weird. It's weird to see Sonny like that, because, like I say, he is one of the best players in the Premier League. But he was up against a Championship team, and he just looked really ordinary, and that's not Sonny. So, yeah, I don't know what's happened there, whether he needed a bit of a rest. Whether I had my predicted team, I actually took him out. I had Bergwijn playing there because I felt it was the game where he probably needed a rest. It was a shame because Bergwijn kind of came on and actually looked quite positive. He started the first 5-10 minutes after he came on. He looked like he was making things happen, and even he kind of faded slightly as extra time went on. But, yeah, was that the chance to rest Sonny, you know? Although I say, you know, you've got 6 days to Everton after that game, so maybe we can kind of get the proper Sonny back. But, yeah, I was really disappointed. And I think a lot of us, any of the journalists who had to do our player ratings, we gave him really, really low marks because, yes, he was creating some of his own chances. You know, there was a little back flick as well. I think it was from Kulusevski's cross right towards in extra time, which was just kind of saved almost on the goal line. But ultimately, a player of that quality should be taking those chances, and he just wasn't. He looked really out of sorts. And you know, there's some of the journos that say about him that he is all or nothing. He's either fantastic in a game or he's really out of it. I don't know if I subscribe to that entirely, because I've seen him have games where he's maybe been off the boil and then suddenly he comes up with a big goal or a big assist or something. So I don't think it's quite as cut and dried as that. But certainly there have been games where he's looked out of sorts. But I don't think I've ever seen him look as out of sorts as he was on Tuesday night. That was so bad. But hopefully he'll be better. He will. I'm sure he will. It's Sonny. He's one of the best. Midfield. Midfield was a mess. An utter mess. It really was. Again, I want to offer up front the excuse of tiredness, because, you know, they've had no Bentancur. They've had no Skip now for over a month. So Winks and Højbjerg have been playing the bulk of every game. And they looked tired. They were chasing shadows a lot. They really were. It was probably one of the worst showings we've seen as them of a pair. You know, and I suppose this is another lingering after effect of having the likes of Lo Celso and Ondembele and even Ali to an extent all going out the squad for reasons we're well aware of. But then that means you have these kind of matches where you don't have them to call upon. You have young Harvey White on the bench, who's, 21, 22, and clearly he isn't trusted yet to come into that midfield. They were poor. They were really poor. And I mean, it says a lot about a squad, about a club, that they're so desperate, so is Conte, to get Skip back. Bentancur, of course, will bring what he brings, but they miss Skip, I think, actually more, because they don't have that drive, they don't have that energy. You look at Tuesday night, Skip and Bentancur play, I don't think Spurs lose that match. And that could be partly down to the tiredness angle, but I also feel that Skip is the kind of player who will fight until his last breath. He will. In a 90-minute match, in the 90th minute, he will still be throwing himself at everything with the same desire and energy that he did in the first minute. And that's just who he is. Like I've always say, I'm very fortunate to see a lot of him playing academy football, and he's always been like that. Always been like that. And yeah, the fact that Conte and Tottenham are so reliant on a 21-year-old says everything. A 21-year-old who last season was playing in the Championship. If anyone would have known that match and how to play Middlesbrough, it would have been Skip. But you look at the players that were there, and Højbjerg is such a funny, contrasting character at times. Sometimes you watch him and he is the leader you want him to be. He's the midfield general. He battles away. He wins important tactical fouls to break up the play, and both in both senses. He kind of concedes them, but he also earns them on himself as well. Takes a lot of whacks, and he'll be talking to players, and he'll guiding other players through games, and he'll play really nice attacking through balls. And the chipped ball for Kane's goal against Leeds was superb. We've seen him do that before. But then there's this other side to Højbjerg that we see sometimes, and I saw it a few times on Tuesday night where he almost sulks a bit. He'll maybe either lose the ball up the pitch or someone won't pass him the ball as he makes a run up the pitch. And he'll kind of sulk a bit, and he'll slowly walk or jog back. And it feels really at odds with the rest of him. And I find that really strange. And it's like, yeah, the rest of the contrast as well. It's like, he can be really hesitant in possession. I felt there was quite a few times on Tuesday night when all it needed was that quick ball to spring Tottenham away, and you just see him and just that moment where he hesitates, the gaps have closed where the ball could have been played through to the attacking players, and Spurs suddenly are back against a team that are all compact and back in defence. And if you miss that opportunity for that quick early ball, it's going to stuff you. And I kind of feel that's where Skip and Bentancur come in. They're both quite good at it, very quickly releasing the ball, whether it's a short pass, whether it doesn't have to be the sexy pass, it doesn't have to be the Hollywood, crossfield ball. It can just be a quick pass to someone else who is moving forward, and just so their momentum takes the ball up. And that's what they do well. I just felt with Højbjerg, there was too many hesitant moments. And again, could be a timeless thing. Could just be frustrated at the moment with where Spurs are at. But, Winks and Højbjerg are both 26 now. They're not kids. They're the kind of people that should be leading from the centre of the pitch. And yeah, I didn't see much of that on Tuesday night from Højbjerg, which was a shame. And Winks, I think just as bad. I think the pair of them were pretty bad. Winks, it's just a strange. If anyone kind of epitomises the inconsistency of Tottenham, it's probably Harry Winks. I've seen him have terrific matches. I've seen him launch in for full-blooded tackles to win the ball back. I've seen him play very clever, cute balls over the top, or slide rule passes, threaded through balls to the strikers. He can do all of that. But then he'll have nights like he did on Tuesday night. And, where that's his weird thing about his tackling. Sometimes he'll slam into a tackle, and sometimes he'll do these kind of, when someone shakes your hand and they just kind of flomp like a wet fish, their hand into your hand. It's like, okay, this is a handshake, is it? Sometimes his tackling's like that. So rather than the full-blooded tackles you'll see him do, the next tackle might be a kind of a, I'm just gonna leave my leg in here, just gonna rest my leg in here somewhere, and it's like, well, that's not gonna win the ball, is it? And actually, you probably end up injuring yourself. It's a very inconsistent tackling style. It's a strange one, and then and that leads to him. I think you'll see him getting breezed past, but players will just run by him. there's no lack of effort on Winks' part. I don't think he's one of these that you can criticise him for a lack of effort. I just think at times his quality dips so much. And you've seen the stats if you haven't. If you haven't, what they are that's gone around the internet is he didn't win a single ground duel, lost all of his 6 ground duels, lost both of his aerial duels in the match, and he was dribbled past more times, 5, than the rest of all the other Spurs players combined against Middlesbrough. It kind of says a lot, really, like I say, about that inconsistency. And I just feel for him. I do, because I think he hasn't really kicked on since those years under Poch when he was really starting to come through, and then when he became an England international. He could quite rightly say he hasn't had a lot of minutes, and that's part of it. On the flip side, when he's had those minutes, probably hasn't always done enough to justify getting back in the team. And I just feel for him now, because I feel like when Bentancur and Skip are fit, I think he's 4th choice of those 4 midfielders. I think he is. Conte says he can count on him, but I think if Conte were to do a straight choice of those 4 players, I think he ends up being 4th choice. And I just wonder whether in the summer, I still just probably feel for Harry Winks, it's time to go and reignite his career. I think it is. And I do like Harry Winks. I've got a little connection with him. He was when I was starting out in this job, and he was a young midfielder. There was a couple of times he was really good to me. He stopped and did really good interviews with me in the mix zone. Which, if you're a young reporter, not young, but how do I put it? An inexperienced kind of Premier League reporter. I'd been used to always managing to talk one-on-ones with players in League 2 and non-league levels. So to come into Premier League, where the mix zone is a bit of a scrum. And you very much kind of have to try and get your dictaphone in among all this scrum of journalists trying to get stuff. But Harry Winks was one of the early players who I was able to just go away slightly further down the mix zone, and he would stop and have a little chat with me. So, of course, that makes you have this little kind of connection with him. But it doesn't mean you can kind of ignore the fact that he just has stalled his Tottenham career. And like I say, and I do think it is probably time for him to have a new challenge. That's not to say he can't still contribute a lot for the rest of this season, but I just feel in the summer he needs to go somewhere where he's going to be a 1st choice, and I don't think that'll be at Tottenham. It's just sad. It is sad, because he is. He's one of Spurs' own. He's come through the academy. But I just think, unfortunately, I think the fans of a lot of them have turned against him. I saw my thoughts on people that tag players in. I saw someone on Twitter that had tagged him in and was just essentially abusing him and then revelling in the fact that Winks had blocked him. I don't like that. I don't. There's no positive to that. There's no reason for that. It's just someone trying to, I don't know, just kind of get a rise out of someone and then revel in it on social media. It does nobody any good, and I don't think it shows up the person that did it particularly well either. And unfortunately, I think Winks will get a lot of that. He will. I've seen some horrific things written about him, and you just kind of think, like, with the wider context of what's going on in the world right now and the awful things happening to people out there, in the Ukraine, of course, and then you just see the way that sometimes people talk to these footballers. Like, some of them almost kind of like wishing death on them and stuff like that. It's just like, people sometimes are so disconnected from reality. It worries me. It really does. But I don't know if anything's going to change these people. I don't know. It's so strange. But on the slightly going down a different kind of tunnel or corridor there. But with Winks, yeah, I think he's a player who can play himself back into good things. But I just don't feel it's probably going to be at Tottenham. Which is a shame when it's an academy product, of course. So Tottenham, what comes next? I don't think there's anyone else really we can say. Wing backs. Wing backs were slightly disappointing after being so good against Leeds. Session was very quiet again. Doherty was a bit better. Had that chance when he rounded Lumley, but at the time I was like, oh my God, why didn't you just kind of square it to Son? But when I looked at it back, I think if you're a player that's surrounded a keeper and they kind of had a good camera angle that showed his view, I think you probably do go for that shot. I think you do. I think he messed it up, but I think it had to be just a low curling shot is what you'd probably do on the training ground 9 times out of 10. But it just caught it underneath it and kind of, it was not good at all. It wasn't. So yeah, it was disappointing to see them not kind of cement that first choice status. That's not to say that Reguilon and Emerson did anything good when they came on either. I thought both didn't really make an impact. Emerson probably in a negative way, unfortunately. So I think we've pretty much covered every player. So looking forward, I mean, in a nutshell, summer has to be, I think, the biggest in Daniel Levy's 21-year tenure at the club. I think it is. On the pitch, certainly. Obviously off the pitch, there's been big summers and the delay on the stadium and trying to get that pushed through and all of that sort of stuff. But on the pitch, I think this is the crossroads. I really do, because he has to shift that transfer profile. He does, even if it's just for one or two signings. Conte said it. We've seen it in his quotes about the blend. If you put a bit of experience in there, you speed up your process. And he said something to me. What did he say? He said something. I've got a quote here. I took it. Here we are. The truth is that today we're talking about a defeat. The last game we won. 2 games ago we lost. 3 games ago we won. And I think that I can't hide the reality. No. The reality is that we're having too many ups and downs. We have to try and work. And I think this is a problem now, and maybe also in the past. In my opinion, there's only one way to try to improve and to continue to work many aspects, to persevere, to be patient, because you need to have patience in the process and to hope in the future the situation will be much better and not wait for a long time. And I should point out, when he said patient, he smiled at me. He was asking, I think he was answering my question. But he smiled because I think he remembered that it was me that asked him the question about whether he was being patient. So he did a little smile when he said the patient thing. But, a manager like Conte, with everything that he expects from his football clubs and what he wants to do, having him saying the words hope, persevere, not wait for a long time, they're not the words that he's used to using. And this is what worries me about this summer, because I think Levy will be worried more about the fact that Conte wasn't angry and raging. Because if you remember, Conte said the other day, if I'm angry, it's because I care. And I just, when you look at stuff like that, is he starting to feel like, I think I've made a mistake and stuff like that? And the only way to kind of, they had positive talks, him and Levy, after the game, after the Burnley game. And, there's a lot of flattery coming Levy's way to Conte and all of that, which was what all managers, they need to have their ego stroked, of course. But just to look that disconnected with this result, I think that would worry him, because, I was trying to think about this the other day. If Conte were to go in the summer because he feels that he can't have another season like this, where do Tottenham go? That's my biggest worry for Tottenham, because they've tried it all. They've done the best managers in the world. They've done the best coaches in the world. They've done the superstar names. They've done the young progressive coaches. The only one that obviously I could imagine would be a popular appointment, which would get some heat off Levy in the summer, would be Mauricio Pochettino, of course. Celebrated his 50th birthday yesterday. Where's that gone? I mean, where's that time gone? I was shocked when I saw it was 50. But with Poch, I don't know whether it's right. Would it be the summer that they could get him back? I'm sure they'd try if Conte were to go. There's some suggestions that perhaps if he were to leave PSG, or PSG were to remove him from his role, that he'd have some kind of gardening leave, which would then make it difficult. But whether Tottenham see, PSG see Tottenham as a rival is a whole other thing. There's obviously been talk about him going to Man U, but I get the impression that Man U and Ten Hag are maybe the fit that we'll end up seeing, perhaps. I just don't know. And then my other fear with Pochettino coming back is that he's going to walk back into a situation that's not really far removed from the one he left when he was sacked in 2019. Why come back to that? I don't know. I mean, he's had a bit of a rude awakening in PSG, I think. I think he's realised, whoa, this is not the kind of club that I'm used to. And, building a tight-knit group. And we all said it back when the Real Madrid rumours were around with Poch. Like, he needs to create this family atmosphere. You can't do that at a club like PSG. It's not how it works. There's too many other people. There's too much entourage. There's too many people hanging around, and it's not a tight-knit family atmosphere. There's too many superstars, probably. But yeah, and I mean, if Poch isn't coming back, then who? You're looking at restarting the whole process. There's no real big name managers. The other big name managers probably out there, other than Conte and Mourinho, are probably Klopp and Guardiola, and they're not coming to Tottenham anytime soon. So then you're looking for another progressive young manager. Obviously, last summer they looked at Graham Potter, but Graham Potter, from what I understand, didn't want to get engaged in any kind of talks with Tottenham because he felt that actually Brighton were more stable. And you look at what's happened since, he was right. Nuno lasted 4 months and was sacked. So he was quite right. He made the best choice, I think, for him. I do think he's a good coach, and I do think he would actually be really good at Tottenham. But, whether a year on they could convince him of that, I don't know. But I do. I really worry at where it'll be and how the fans would react, and how much time the fans would give to people. I think the only thing he can do, Daniel Levy, is to throw everything he can at keeping Conte happy. I think that's what it has to be, because, it could really be the last roll of the dice for Levy in terms of trying to make Tottenham an elite club in this moment. It may be that in the future it could happen again, but I think Conte is his ticket to becoming a top club. They've got all the infrastructure. Conte is the man that can coach a team into being one of the best, but he has to have a standard of player, a quality of player and squad. He said it himself, I need to be able to make subs or rotate my team, and the player coming in is the same quality. And that's not the case at Tottenham. And that's why, I've seen people criticising his timing of substitutions and things like that, but I think it's because he doesn't trust some of the players. I don't think he is, to be a like-for-like replacement. I mean, on Tuesday night, you've got 2 or 3 injuries, and the bench has got all the young players on it. He pretty much only had Steven Bergwijn as a recognised attacking, game-changing player. And then you're looking at having to bring on wing-backs to try and change things, like the Sessegnons and Emersons. And it's there laid out. It's an undeniable truth. It is, in front of Daniel Levy's eyes. It's no longer the manager. Get away from this thought of it's always the manager. It's the players. And the recruitment side has to be right. But not only that, the profile has to change. By all means, it's going to be a window where I think we're going to have to see a fair few changes. I think we are. I think you're going to have to see 4, 5, maybe 6 signings. And if that's the case, by all means, sign 2 or 3 of those, maybe 4, that have to be that young profile that can only get better, these young talented players. But also get 1 or 2 winners, experienced players that Conte can bring in and know they are ready to do the job straight away. There are players out there. There will be. And there will be players that Conte asks for. Because, it's ridiculous. The seesaw nature of this Tottenham team right now. They can still do something. They can, if they can just sort it out. They're 7th place still. They beat Everton on Monday night, and they're just bang, they're straight in there, because obviously their last Premier League game was a win. So they win 2 back-to-back Premier League games, and then suddenly they're just there. But there's no confidence right now in believing that they can make top 4 because of this win-loss, win-loss, win-loss. And at some point, that becomes a loss-loss. That becomes a draw-loss, loss-draw-loss. That was easier in my head than it was to say. But it's so difficult right now with Tottenham and the way they are. And I think the stability has to come from above. Maybe Levy would have told Conte that in their talks last week. Maybe he would have said to him, look, we're going to do it this summer. I promise we will. Because, there's only so much hoping that Conte and the Tottenham fans can do. Ultimately, they need to see that the man at the top is going to try and make things happen. The money has to be found. There has to be... If you have these aspirations of being an elite club, you have to act like one. And just... Honestly, huge. I don't want it to be another summer where I'm writing about a farcical managerial search. I want it to be a summer where I'm writing about exciting things that are happening at Tottenham, and oh my goodness, they're actually stepping it up a level, and it is the big summer that we all kind of hoped it would be. Because if it's the managerial search, I may lose my mind. I really may. So just to sign off, I'm recording this earlier in the day, and there have been some little rumblings that the Super League might be relaunched again today, or certainly notification served. From those I've spoken to, a few people around Tottenham, they've kind of been a bit like, ooh, we don't know anything about this. So I would suggest, I think some of the other suggestions from reports seem to be that Tottenham aren't going to be involved. It's a weird time. The reading of the room from this group of clubs that are kind of doing the Super League has been so bad. Last time, obviously, it was announced slap bang in the middle of the pandemic when everyone's struggling financially. If it was to be announced today, they're doing it during a war going on. It's like, oh, come on, guys. What is wrong with you? It'll just be a mess. I mean, I don't want to go into it too much because we don't really know what's happening at this point. There may be, as I'm filming this, stuff might have come out. There might be more information. So I don't want to end up talking about stuff that isn't the case or stuff that is. But yeah, I mean, there was all contract stuff. It was quite messy legally, the whole Super League thing as well. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that. And hey, if all the top teams come out of the Premier League, Tottenham might win it next year. Maybe that's Conte can stay because Tottenham can win the Premier League. I'm joking, of course. So there you go. Right, I'm going to head off now. We'll leave it at that. Another bizarre week in the life of Tottenham Hotspur, as always. At least I've done my little run of 4 in a row northern trips. And it's not to say the north isn't nice, but a lot of long trips, a lot of long train journeys. Met a lot of very cool Spurs fans on the way. One young man on the way back from Leeds spent essentially the entire 2.5 hour leg of that train journey asking me various questions about Tottenham. He was such a nice guy that I couldn't just say, please let me work. I wrote about 2 paragraphs in 2.5 hours. It was so nice. And but he just would not let me work. He wouldn't at all. But no, I have met lots of very nice Spurs fans. Spurs fans are always very good. They come up and say hello, and we'll have a little chat about the games and things like that. And I always like to try and make some time to talk to people because they're just like me. We like our football. We like to talk about it. So it's good fun. But yes, the run of Northern games has come to a little bit of a temporary end because obviously it's Everton at home on Monday night, but then it is back to Manchester United, which is going to be interesting. I think we've got Brighton and West Ham. It's just the Premier League to focus on now. You know, Tottenham have to find some focus. They have to find some stability. And like I've been saying in this video, it has to come from the top down. So let's see what happens, eh? Right, I'm going to head off. As always, stay safe, stay healthy, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you later. Goodbye.